Best Foot Forward, Debbie Ellman.
I'm filling in for Debbie, but she's present.
So we don't have an alternate yet, but you can definitely stay and listen in.
Okay.
But it won't count towards a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Black Chamber of Commerce, Cassandra Oliver.
Present online.
Card at FAU, Sabrina DeGoges. Card at FAU, Jack Scott. Coalition for Black Student Achievement, Dr. Deborah Robinson. Coalition for Black Student Achievement, Deborah Stewart. Compass, Amanda Canetti.
Present online.
Thank you. Compass, Rex Barnes. Connect to Greatness, Dr. Cassandra Corbin Thaddeus. Connect to Greatness, Andre Thaddeus. I believe they're both out of town. District ESC Advisory Committee, Kimberly Spire O. District ESC Advisory Committee, Michelle Beatty.
Present online.
Division of Blind Services, Cesar Vigo.
Good morning, present online.
Great. Economic Council of Palm Beach County, Craig McKenzie. El Sol Jupiter, Suzanne Whitbeck. Florida Hispanic American Chamber of Commerce, Juan Pagan.
Presente en vivo.
All right. Florida Hispanic American Chamber of Commerce, Evelyn Vargas. For the Children, Reggie Durandis. Gold Coast Down Syndrome, Sue Davis Killian. Guatemalan Maya Center, Mariana Blanco.
Present online.
Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Maria Antunia. Hispanic Education Coalition of Palm Beach County, Hector Pedre.
Yes, good morning. Present online.
Morning.
Thank you.
NAACP, Diedrich Strawn. Palm Beach County Council of PTAs, Charmaine Postal. Palm Beach County Council of PTAs, Marcus Brown. Palm Beach County Human Rights Council, Emmy Kinney.
Present.
Tri-City Education Committee, Mary Evans. Thank you. Tri-City Education Committee, Mr. Rhodes.
Present in person. All right.
All right.
Thanks for coming in from Glades.
Urban League of Palm Beach County, Terrence Reed.
Present online.
Thank you. Volunteer Association of America, Widline Pierre.
Present online.
And Classroom Teachers Association, Gordon Longhofer.
Gordon Longhofer, present.
Welcome. And Palm Beach County School Administrators Association, Jay Blavitt.
Present online
Great.
for as long as I can.
Okay. So we go. Thank you. Exactly.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
We're good. We have a quorum.
All right. Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
We have
Good
a
news.
quorum. We will proceed with approval of the September minutes. All those in favor? You have a motion? Right.
Motion by Mr. Rhodes. Is there a second?
Any seconds?
I second.
Thank you. Motion approved and first one and second?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Any opposed?
All right. This passed.
Sorry about that.
Okay, it is approved. We continue. We have the next item of the agenda is the public comments. 2 minutes per speaker. Any public comments that would like to be made right now? Speak now or shut up forever. None? Thank you. We're gonna do it with the update from DDEC ad hoc subcommittee, the subcommittee representative.
I know they didn't have a quorum for today. Is there anybody else on regarding that? I see Mariana, you had your hand up? Or no? Oh, no. So, and I know a number are out of town. Okay. So we'll just move on.
All right, we move on. No one present, so we'll move on to the next item. The updates from the Chief of Equity and Wellness, Mr. Keith Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. Finally got a break from the weather. So just for updates, the grant I told you that the DDC provided the letter of support, the $1 million for check-in, check-out, was approved last night at the board meeting. So we'll begin to start rolling that out, and we'll provide updates as we go along. Congresswoman Lois Frankel did have a press conference on that. I think it was last week. You may have seen some of that to thank the district for their support to working on safety in schools. In addition, the other grant, the Stronger Connections that we talked about last time, that will be submitted tomorrow. So we are pushing forward with that one as well. In addition, we were working with the Education Foundation, who received some funding through the state foundation. We put in for $500,000, essentially to spend the majority of it on, we're going through an instructional materials process for the resiliency standards and the 5 hours of required mental health training. So we're actually going to go through a process to find hopefully better resources and curriculum in this space. What we heard from the students and teachers is currently what we're using, they don't really like a lot. So we're going to go through a process with instructional materials process. It'll take almost the entire school year. We just released it to providers. So we'll have in a couple months, probably in January, committees to look and review the materials. And as we put the committees together, possibly looking at somebody from the DDC to participate on that as well. In addition, the funding would also support case managers for truancy and dealing with some of the truancy court challenges that, not challenges with the truancy court, but challenges around case management of these families. And that another portion of these funds from Ed Foundation is actually going towards a SIMS process, a simulation process of intercept mapping of the DJJ system and all students who touch that space. So pretty excited about that. Criminal Justice Commission, and some of you may have participated, did this for all students, for adults with mental health issues that touch the judicial system, if you will, and what happens to them from the time of a referral, for example, like a 911 call, to the time they get exited and get ongoing support to address their mental health challenges. And we actually got to participate as a school district. I think Michelle Beatty was on there as well. And it was pretty informative to see all the players in one room, from state's attorney's office to public defenders to Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and everybody just talking through the whole process of what happens from a time a person's arraigned to when they're held in up in jail, and what happens along that way. And the end goal is to develop an action plan for improvement across the system. And we know there's a lot of opportunities to improve the same process for students in the DJJ system. So working with the Juvenile Justice Advisory Board, Barbara Gerlach, also with, going blank now on her name, but with the Criminal Justice Commission, working with these particular contractors, consultants. They also do it for this process, so we are working to schedule that with these consultants for our systems here in Palm Beach. And some of you will be invited, or if you are interested in being invited to attend when that gets calendared, please do let me know. Pretty excited about this. The truancy court process has really kind of shined a light on a lot of the issues that a family experiences when in need of services. So this hopefully will help address some of those issues as well as others here in our particular community. So I'll provide more update on that next month, but if you are interested, please do let me know. Also last night at the school board meeting, the board adopted a number of proclamations from LGBTQ History Month to Disability History and Awareness Month, National Bullying Prevention and Awareness Month, Lights On for After School, Holocaust Education, National PTA Membership, Childhood Cancer Awareness. So a lot of proclamations passed for a lot of the different organizations here that I know that you all support. So I wanted to let you know that, as well as a number of speakers that also attended. In addition, the board also adopted their legislative platform for this year. And for those of you who are interested in seeing in more detail the areas that the board had, areas from school safety and security to student-related priorities for teachers and staff, finance, curriculum accountability, pre-K, as well as others. One of the areas in curriculum, we'll see if it makes any headway, but last month we had the presentation regarding the changes in concordance scores and the impact on graduation rates, in particular for a number of subgroups of students. So that is also part of the platform as well. The school board will be having its delegation meeting on November 1st at the Green Acres Community Center from 9 to 11:30. So those who aren't familiar with it, the school board annually meets to talk about priorities or other issues with the local delegation here that represents Palm Beach County. So that'll be November 1st from 9 to 11:30 over at the Green Acres Community Center this year. So look forward to that. It's always a pretty interesting meeting to hear from our local elected officials across the board. So if anybody's interested, it's a public meeting and you're able to attend. And those conclude my updates at this time. If there's any question about anything that I shared. I know we're a little ahead of schedule since we didn't have any updates from the subcommittee. Okay.
Any comments, any questions? Thank you. We're moving to the next item. We're going to go to the new business and 3 management. Diana Federman.
Yeah, let me just open that up for Ms.
Please.
Federman. So one of the new pieces of legislation, let me just share the screen here and get this started. So this past July, I mentioned this before, that the DOE, working closely with the local legislation and MSD Commission, revised a lot of the threat management process to develop a uniformed process for the entire state for all school districts to follow. Mentioned that this process is actually vetted with the Secret Service and others. Diana can speak more to that. She's been involved. Diana Thurman is one of our trainers around this new process and has been involved with it. And there's also some media coverage the last couple of days on this. You may have seen some things out about this particular piece. So I wanted to go through so everybody's informed about a little bit about the actual training. So a high level of the training, so you understand exactly what schools get trained in. All schools have to have a minimum of 4 members on there, and Diana will speak more to about that membership. So we're well on our way into training. On January 1st is when the state actually flips over to this new process. Currently, we're using the CSTAG model. So Diana, I'll turn over to you, and then I'll just probably jump in as we go along.
No problem. Thank you so much, Mr. Oswald.
Is it reaching?
I do not think so. If you
Okay,
don't
just
mind,
tell me,
we'll
yeah.
that's perfect. Thank you so much. So I just want to go over a quick agenda with you. I'm going to do an overview of 3 areas. The state has described this new process as moving from what they previously have called threat assessment to moving to a threat management process. So I'll review to you those 2 definitions as shared from the state. I'm going to talk to you about their new holistic approach, where each threat or behaviors are reviewed looking at 3 areas: the concerning behaviors, the behaviors according to the pathway to violence, and the protective factors that are currently in place for the student of concern, as well as the student support management plan, or what the protective factors that can currently be in place for the student. So for the process itself, as described by the state, the previous process, or the one that's currently in place today, is what's called a threat assessment process. And that is defined as assessing concerning behaviors and threats. There's a threat assessment protocol that a team in a school goes through. And for that, they look at the concerning behaviors. They look at the threats. They assess what's currently going on. January 1st and further, the state is moving to a threat management process, looking more at behaviors that constitute a concern and moving more in front of a process. So identifying concerning behaviors before they may even rise to the level of a threat, and then putting in place protective factors for young people to provide them with any assistance that they may need before it even rises to the level of a threat, if that can happen before it gets into that place. And then put in place any safety measures that may need to happen. As I go through the next piece, you will notice a lot of language, including those concerning behaviors, coincide with the youth mental health first aid training that the school districts embarked on as well over the last few years. So previously with the youth mental health first aid training, staff members really worked on identifying what are those concerning behaviors? What are behaviors that young people might exhibit that showed they needed assistance? Now it's how can we look at identifying those behaviors and provide them with the assistance before it might escalate. Here are some of the concerning behaviors. These are examples that the state provided with us. Certainly not an exhaustive list of examples, and they can range. It could be unusual social distancing, and the emphasis definitely was placed on these are things that are a change in the student's typical baseline behavior. So if you have a student that was previously very socially active, had a lot of friends, maybe talked a lot, and then all of a sudden began socially isolating, cut themselves off from their friends, didn't talk a lot in class, all of a sudden really started isolating by themselves, that would be a concern to look at. Doesn't mean that student is going to make a threat. It is simply a concern. It's something we want to pay attention to provide our students any assistance that they might need. But it's a concerning behavior that a student might need help. It could be suddenly sullen or depressed behavior from a student that previously had been very friendly, had been very outgoing, and then all of a sudden you notice a change in their baseline behavior. Again, that doesn't mean the student's about to make a threat. It just means that there's a change and we want to reach out and ensure that student has any help that they might need in order to be successful, in order just to be okay. And then you see some escalations there, some out of context outbursts of verbal or physical aggression. Again, just concerning behaviors we want to reach out about. And you can see as they continue to an unusual or fascination with weapons, a fixation on violence as a means of addressing a grievance, or aggression towards animals. These are escalating concerning behaviors. Again, not all of the concerning behaviors that young people might exhibit, but just examples of some. Now, many concerning behaviors, of course, come with stressors, and stressors are not unusual. Everybody has a stressor in life. We all experience these pretty much every day. For our young people, they can be bullying, right? Either bullying in person or perhaps cyberbullying. And we know that our young people experience that. And these type of stressors can lead to those concerning behaviors, such as withdrawal. They could be experiencing failure, disappointment at school, some type of unhappy home environment. Grades is an interesting one to pay attention to because that can hit so many different young people. It could be our students that are experiencing grades as a stressor because they're struggling to hit the grades they need to pass and move on to the next grade level. Or it could be our young people who feel the pressure of grades that they want to hit that perfect HPA or perfect GPA and feel that stressor to always achieve the A. Financial distress, social media, of course, causes a lot of stressors in our young people that then in turn could lead to concerning behaviors. So in the threat management training that our schools are, that representatives from schools are undergoing right now, they talk about the stressors. They talk about the concerning behaviors, just things to look out for young people. Not to put everybody through a threat management protocol, but to pay attention to make sure that we're reaching out to our young people who are exhibiting some of these concerning behaviors, who all of a sudden start withdrawing from friends, to pay attention, to make sure we offer out a helping hand. Now, I said there were 3 factors in this holistic approach that we pay attention to during the threat management process. First is concerning behaviors, which I just discussed. The second, once it moves to a threat management process, is also looking at where the student is on a pathway to violence, if they are even on a pathway to violence. And this is what the pathway to violence is. It was developed by the Department of Homeland Security. You can see that noted at the bottom there. It has all the different aspects on the pathway to violence. You'll note, as we discuss in the training, it is multidimensional. You can note that by the arrows on both sides. I think we're used to reading from left to right, so our eyes naturally start at the left and we want to just progress naturally all the way to your right, just because that's how we read. But that's not how this graphic works. Students can, or any person can move any different way on this pathway to violence. You can move between personal grievance and ideation and just go back and forth between those two for years and years and years. Somebody on this pathway to violence might go from around personal grievance to ideation and research and planning and just circle around those. Somebody can go from personal grievance to attack in minutes. They can move back and forth on this particular graphic, but it is multidimensional. You'll notice a line there in the middle that splits thoughts, the grievance, right? The concept that I have an issue with somebody, to ideation. I'm starting to become convinced, to becoming convinced that violence is the only way to solve this problem, this grievance that I have, to research and planning. These are all thoughts. And then the line delineates action, right? That's where I'm actually preparing for the violence, probing and breaching a dry run, and then the attack. So that's what the line in the middle delineates, thoughts versus actions.
So if I want to jump in there, so this isn't something that the state of Florida created, this pathway. And you went through some of the training, Diana, but when we've seen some of this at other training that we had with the FBI and Homeland Security, that this pathway to violence is the research looking and studying not just those who school shooters, but also just those who shoot in general, and studying over years, decades of work through those different agencies. So typically the personal grievance piece tends to be a common starting point in a lot of the trainings and research that I've seen regarding, and I think the important piece about that, it's your perception of a personal grievance for these individuals. So how someone interprets whether that's a bullying act or being pushed away from friends or others. So,
Or brushed against in a hallway, or stepped on a shoe. It doesn't have to be a quote unquote real action. It's the perception.
I have a quick question. Is this program available, or is it awareness to the parents that this program is ongoing program within the school system, and it's also available in more than one language? Because a lot of the parents, I'll taking a guess, 15% of the parents of the school district in Palm Beach do not speak English. So, how do they, and they might be observing that behavior, but they cannot identify, they don't know what that behavior is, quote unquote, called, So it might be some sort of a guidance for them to approach somebody at the school that they can talk in the same language, in Spanish, whatever, Creole, and make sure they communicate.
let me jump in first. So first, it's not really a program. It's really a process.
Mhm.
So to address, concerning behaviors, what's good about this new process is trying to get in front of the work and not looking at something in isolation, but really getting into the prevention side of it, the support side of it, which I think you're going to talk more about. So as far as language and language barriers, so that should always be taken into consideration when working with a particular student and their background and cultural differences. We've had that a lot with some of the threats that have come through, where some parents, are not taking it seriously enough, maybe because of a cultural background difference, versus our process. So I've seen that in some of the threats that have come through. So, but yeah, so that's definitely, I don't know if I answered your question, if you wanted to add.
The only piece I would add is, obviously I agree with everything Mr. Oswald said. The only piece that we add in is when it does start to move through the threat management process and and there's something to discuss, or we move into talking to a parent when there is a threat where we have to interview parents and we talk to students. We have, during the training, we talk about who's interviewing parents, and we discuss to make sure if parents or families are comfortable communicating in a language that is other than English, you have to ensure that there's somebody in that room that is being able to communicate with that parent in a language in which they are the most comfortable. So we have that conversation, yes.
Because at the end, we all think about with the end goal in mind, which is to avoid any kind of things that might have the wrong effects, Just
Hand over here.
please go ahead.
Just a curiosity for my sake, preparations for violence. What that consists of? What do we? Could you explain that a little bit for me?
Then I'll jump in.
So as it was explained in the training for us to turn around and then train the representatives from the schools, that can include a lot of things. That could include the acquiring of any weapons. That can include if the person, whoever the person is, whether it's a student or an adult or whomever, That could include if they were planning on death by suicide after the attack. That could include creating that suicide video. It could include aligning accomplices. Even if the accomplices were not aware of what the actual attack would be, it could still include lining up accomplices. But it's actions that are preparing for that violence.
So others that I've seen in the training, it's where some of the shooters profiled go out and start buying guns or weapons to use. Actually writing out hit lists of individuals. It could be looking at diagrams. So it's actually physical action. Then when you get into the probing, breaching, making attempts to drive around a site that you're looking at.
If I
Right.
walked into this door, is someone going to stop me? My dry run.
So just kind of practicing it out prior to. And again, this is based on
What
the
about the
research
civil?
of interviewing and studying previous shootings,
Okay.
and not just school related.
Question?
Yes. I noticed in relation to concerning behaviors, for the isolating, for example, it was a change in that. I'm coming at this from a perspective of children with autism, students with autism. Could you discuss briefly how thank you, how the system is sensitive to the differences presented by many of our exceptional students?
Yes, sir. So I can answer that in a few different ways. So in one way, the training really emphasizes looking for what is a change in baseline behavior. So if you have a student who is quiet or self-isolates, and that student has typically always self-isolated or is quiet, that's not a change in baseline behavior. It is typical behavior for that young person. It's not a change. What you would look for is this young person quiet and self-isolating, but yet a few months ago was, the life of the party and the class clown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's different. It's different than typical behavior. Additionally, what is a new piece of the legislation is the team working around the core four has to make sure that they speak to and gather information from a team member or from a staff member that knows the young person. And that's new to this process, where previously they just stuck to the core team. Now, if nobody on that core threat management team is an instructional or administrative person that knows the young person, they have to reach out and speak to somebody that knows the young person, is familiar with that young person, so they can say, this is typical behavior. This would be typical. Additionally, so then to go further, there are pages inside of the threat management manual that speak to if the student of concern it has an IEP or has further considerations, you have to make sure you work through that entire process. You want to talk to the ESE coordinator, maybe reach out to your district ESE team, have further considerations. Is the behavior a manifestation? Like those kind of conversations are part of the entirety of the process.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So another quick question, regarding just the recent case we have here with the kid in the cage, right, in Jupiter. And was any observation of that kid was misbehaving in any shape or form, at the school, and nobody reported that, or nobody brought to the attention on somebody? Because according, you hear the father's testimony was like that kid was, totally, out of bounds, so, and now the mother is going to go to trial, but.
We couldn't talk about specific cases, and I know, Ms. Carmona, if you're jumping in on that or something else. So obviously anybody who has a concerning behavior, and what we we train the students, the see something, say something, right? That's our motto. Our Fortify Florida tip app is being used constantly. It's going off as we speak right now. I get all the tips that come into Palm Beach County. So and our students, as well as our community, have been very diligent about any concerning behaviors that come up to report that, and we continue to message that so that we can get in front of anything. And I can tell you, it's happening daily where two kids are sending in tips to really get kids help. And I also want to say there's also a line between self-harm versus suicidal thoughts versus homicidal thoughts. And there's a lot of research that there's a fine line where one can split from one to the other. Built into this process as well is looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Fetterman, suicide risk assessments that are also conducted regarding any self-harm also being part of this particular process.
So if a threat comes in that is, excuse my language, but it's considered not a threat, it's only threat to self, right? And excuse my use of the term only, but it's that and not a threat to others, then it goes through that process to get students the mental health assistance they need for the harm to self. And it works through the mental health aspect students need in order to get assistance for harm to self as opposed to harm to others. Or sometimes it's both, in which case both happen. But there is a separate aspect. So if the threat comes in and is noted as solely harm to self, then it goes into the suicide risk assessment process.
And there's a question online. Ms. Postal asked, can we share what does manifestation means?
So if the behavior, and you'll have to, and Lisa might want to come in and help me on this one. If the manifestation or manifestation of the behavior, if the behavior, concerning behavior, or what comes in as a threat is happens because it is part of or manufactured from the student's disability or learning difference, that would be considered as well. And if Ms. Carmona wants to clarify my definition.
Okay.
Yeah, basically the law says that we cannot discipline or take action against a student if certain behaviors are a manifestation of their disability. What this means is that we've got to, when a student has a disability of record, we've got to take that disability into account when looking to either discipline or take any action with regard to this particular student.
Are there disabilities that recognize propensities towards violence that would come up in this?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Can you repeat the question?
Are there disabilities that have known propensities towards violence that would come up in this screen in your process? I don't think of it for autism or intellectual disability or many of the others.
No, the only common pathways I've seen in the training is typically one of the commonalities. I'm not saying it's causation because the FBI is very cautious when they say that, but typically there can be alcohol or drugs related and mental health issues related to some commonalities amongst shooters. So I'm sure I'm using the terminology correctly, but not necessarily disabilities. I think in some of the research I've seen, there are some with, some, many without, but not necessarily any type of correlation.
Thank you.
All right, move forward.
I think it's turned off. If you don't mind hitting the next slide, please, Keith. Thank you so much. This new process also spends a lot of time, which I think is a positive, as looking at the protective factors, both on the front end and on the back end. So here's what I mean by that. On the front end, when considering going through the threat management process, when looking at a behavior or at a potential threat that is stated, they look at the protective factors that are currently in place. And school staff were trained on what protective factors are during the youth mental health first aid training. And those are the concepts that young people, anybody, any adult actually, would have in place that are protective, that are positive in their lives. Some examples of protective factors that could be in place for our young people would be just a relationship with a trusted adult. We learned in our youth mental health first aid training that's actually the number one protective factor that a young person could have is having a trusted adult that they could talk to. Having short and long-term goals. If a young person has something that they're working toward, both in the short term and in the long term, it's a protective factor. They see a pathway in their life. The nonviolent, legally and socially sanctioned conflict resolution. If young people know how they can resolve conflicts, because conflicts happen in life, but knowing how to resolve those conflicts. Mentorship, right? Having a mentor. And membership in appropriate groups, and then knowledge of self-regulation strategies, knowing how, when they feel themselves growing angry, when they feel themselves growing upset, how they can calm down and how that works for them. So do they need time away? Do they need to do deep breathing? Does it help for them to maybe garden outside or go for a run, or what activity works for them to center themselves? So the threat management process actually looks at what are the protective factors do young people have in place when the threat comes in? Do they actually have some long and short-term goals in place? Do they have a good relationship with their family? Do they have mentors? Do they have relationships with trusted adults? Do they belong to groups? They consider all of those different things. And if those protective factors are not present, they work with the young person to see which ones they can line up in order to start putting those protective factors in place for that young person. And that brings me to the final slide. This is called from the state the SSMP because education loves its acronyms. This is the Student Support Management Plan. And this is what the state has asked schools to create for young people. If a threat comes in and a young person has made a threat, what is a plan that can be put into effect for that young person? And this plan serves several goals, 3 different goals. If a young person makes a threat, then this plan goal is to keep that young person safe, the student of concern safe, to keep the entire campus safe. And if there's an identified student target, if that young person made a threat against somebody else, it's to keep that identified student target safe. And there are different things that can be placed into that student support management plan. These could include things like schedule changes. It might be possible to separate the student of concern and identified student target. So there might be schedule changes put into place. So this could be things like different buses as well. Or something like assigning a mentor. Might see that that young person needs a mentor, needs that relationship with a trusted adult. So that could be placed in the plan as well. Or perhaps extracurricular activities, perhaps membership with an appropriate group was missing. And maybe aligning that young person with extracurricular activities or sports in which they may be interested in is an option. Regular meetings with a counselor, of course, with the requisite parental permission or referrals to outside behavioral health services, again, with parental permission. Or you might have escorts or restricted use of computers, again, all depending on what the threat was. But if a threat occurs, which is, as Keith noted, those things happen, there are management plans put into place in order to keep everybody safe on a school campus. All of these pieces I mentioned are part of the training process, which the state of Florida has put into place. Team members of a school must be trained. The due date is prior to January 1st. We are on a good track to have all requisite members trained by mid-November. So we are on track to meet that goal. Mr. Oswald?
So some of the other changes I want to talk about, the threats are assessed, the categories changed in this new process to low, medium, high. Before there was some other terminology that a lot of people had confusion with. So low, medium, high. It requires the 4 members have to be an administrator, an educator, someone with a mental health or counseling background, and they have to either be a licensed mental health professional or certified in school counseling. And school police. So, or police in general, law enforcement. And they have to be trained in the process. And as Ms. Fetterman mentioned earlier, if they, those 4 people do not know the student, you can bring in, you must bring in someone who actually knows that student to speak to the behaviors. In addition, the change is they now assign a chair and a vice chair. The principal can no longer be part of the core team because the principal is a final decision maker and things are referred over. So there's additional training for chairs, vice chairs, and principals to understand that role. The concern that came up through the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission meeting and Sheriff Galtieri is that there's large volume of threats that are coming in that were not really threats. It empowers the decision-making and judgment calls of the chair to potentially handle a situation that comes in differently and if supported by the principal. So 2 kindergartners in class at recess, fighting over a particular playground equipment, and the other one doesn't let them play and says, "I'm going to kill you." And right. So typically, for those who know those 2 kindergartners and clearly just said something out of an outburst, could assess that and handle that differently versus pulling the whole team together to go through the process. Right. So they saw across the state that schools and districts were taking every single thing to the threat assessment team, soon to be called threat management team, and not using that kind of judgment. So they're empowering to use that kind of judgment. Obviously, there's concern. That's where the principal is kind of can say and tell the chair, no, you need to pull the team together, or, it can just be handled differently. So that's another big change going through. Timeline, there's a lot of timelines in the new process and protocols and that need to be followed. So typically everything's about 24 to 48 hour turnaround. It also requires not only a school-based threat management team, but it also requires a district threat-based management team and a district threat management coordinator. Our district threat management coordinator is Dr. Ruth Francis, who's our coordinator. And then also we have a number of individuals who are part of the district threat management. So we also monitor a number of these threats that come from schools from the district level to support the schools to make sure that this student support management plan is a good one, is in process and monitoring that well. Which includes all the same players. So we have school police there, we have administrators, et cetera. Currently, it's always going to be current, but all of our schools, including charter schools, have a trained team now through CSTAG. And like as Ms. Fetterman said, we are responsible for the charter schools, so they're part of this process as well. The sharing of information is one of the other concerns that came out of MSD Commission meeting. So what's part of the new rulemaking that came out of this and legislation is that by 2025, that all the districts in the state of Florida will be unified, that they will talk to each other. So currently we have an student information system where we house our particular threats where certain people have access to. Schools have a responsibility if that student transfers to another school that within 5 days you're sharing that information. We push for that be quicker. Or if they're transferring out of county or state. However, we know that doesn't always happen with Fidelity. We'll get students in that we'll find out after have been assessed. So the sharing of information through a unified database where if a student transfers into our our district from a state school will be able to see that information almost simultaneously the time we put them into our student information system. If you like what that is. So that's in process right now. The sheriff is working with all the different vendors that currently house threat assessments at this time. Again, the biggest thing I want to say is that for this group and why I think this topic is important, yeah, it's a heavy topic to bring to this group, right? You know, but it's a reality we live in this world, in this day and age. Things have changed, and it's important for the community to know that schools do have trained individuals, that the district is monitoring this closely. I said we get, tips and referrals all the time from students to community members, teachers, et cetera. And that there's a process to handle that on every school, that, we have layers of mitigation to reduce school violence. This is a strong one that really does a lot with the new processes in particular to get in front of it, to make sure that proactive factors and strategies are in place. So it's important for you all to understand that, to let your organizations, your agencies know that this process is in place. So if they hear things or have tips, that anybody can turn that over to the school so that it can be looked at, so we can really help support our students and keep all of our schools safe. So this time, yeah, we'll turn over.
Yes. I'm thinking of the Broward situation with Nicholas Cruz, where he took himself out of special ed because he was 18 and he had the right to do that, and where that was not apparently contested in a due process or other court action. I know this seems really good, but I don't see IEP modifications being recommended. The IEP process would help govern that, but I don't see that being recommended. And I'm a bit concerned there. And it's the oddball situation, if you can use that word, of the Nicholas Cruz kind of situation that, that's the most severe threat we've seen in Florida ever. But there, I think there are some students who will have emotional behavioral disorders or autism potentially, where the threat profile may be high, who should be in special ed, in my view, and the view of many other professionals, but who may, they're 18, take themselves out, or their parents may. And districts are typically hesitant to go due process to keep a kid in special ed in general. I don't know the stance of Palm Beach County.
So a couple of things that you said there. So one, it may not have come out in this presentation, but ESC is definitely a factor that's addressed in the training as well as through the process. We have many of, I look at a lot of the safety plans or the student support management plan, the new name, where that is part of the process, and the child study team convening as well to look at that, because some of those particular strategies in an IP may be part of this support management plan. So it definitely has to be taken consideration. The other part that you said about what was the other part you just said? I lost my
Student who takes himself out of special ed.
Well, I can tell you that, Sheriff Galtieri and the entire commission looked at a lot of the problems across the continuum in that particular case at MSD, and really why the changes here are being made, because people dropped the ball, right? Things fell through the cracks from the time he was young to the time he got older, right? So there's things that could have been done differently when he was in elementary school and the type of program he was in and support. So that, and really why this change is happening, so that if he would have had those proactive, factors put in place earlier, or in a way that really helped address his issues, that could have prevented this, right, tragedy from happening. There was something else you said too. I wanted to comment, but it'll pop in my head, I'm sure. So,
Thank you. Any other comment, question, please?
I have a quick question. I'm wondering if within this training or within this process, if there's any if there's any special consideration about threats of violence against a specific group. Like, I'm thinking in our criminal justice system, if there's violence against a person, it's a crime. If there's violence against somebody because they're Jewish or a person of color or gay, it's a hate crime and it's treated differently. So I'm wondering if that is taken as a more serious threat or if there's anything in this training that kind of covers that. I have to ask because of the rise of violence against certain marginalized groups.
So absolutely, anything that comes through like that, we'll handle through hate crime, through law enforcement, through criminal investigations. The student code of conduct, we do have certain codes to take a stronger stance, and we have had issues like that where we have had more severe consequences as it relates to when there's a hate crime situation involved. So it could actually, it could be both, right? So a threat comes in to, and this is unfortunately has happened, right, to someone who is Jewish, right? And it could be a threat, as well as there's going to be severe consequences to the student code of conduct and other things. But we're still monitoring the student, the threat, and handling it more severely because of the hate behind it.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions within Pierre.
Yes. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My it's not really a question, but what will the district do in regard to parental permission? Because you do have a lot of parents out there, even though the kids need help, they feel like they don't need help. So what action will we take? Because you may have a kid that really need a assigned mentor to talk to a mental health professional or a school counselor, but then you have parents refusing to sign the consent form. So what action or plan that we have in regard to that? And my other part of this is, do we have like case managers within the district to follow up with those agencies to make sure like those parents are following through once we do like an outside referral and making sure like, okay, they're following through and the kid is actually started to get services? Like, is there anything we have in place or we are thinking to have in place in regard to, those situations if they do come up?
So, yeah, so there's a lot there that you brought up in a really good point. So one, first, the process itself does require a threat management team meeting on something that comes in. Does not require parental permission. It does require parental notification, and there are timelines there. When it comes to refusal for certain recommendations like mental health supports, you're right. We're required to have parent permission slips for that. And we've had situation where parents do decline. And when it is strongly recommended, I think more for when there's self-harm. We have been, and Ms. Carmona, you can weigh in as well, but what we have been working with our schools is to notify the parent in writing that this is going against our recommendations from the professionals at the school, that you're in writing, letting them know you're declining services, though we strongly recommend that this needs to be in place. If it's a situation where potentially, and again, there's no two situations are the same, but some type of threat, outward threat, we may take additional actions of safety, maybe more restrictive environment, if based on a particular situation where parents uncooperative, right? Where our priority is making sure the school is safe. In the end, we're going to work really hard to try to get parents to cooperate, to take, in particular when it comes to mental health supports, to take on those services. But you're right, that's a challenge, and a good reason why we're talking about this today is for you all and your influence that you have over your communities that you represent, to let them know that's important, so that getting mental health support is not a bad thing, right? And to take that and get that support if your child is ever in that situation. So hopefully I answered that question, Lily.
Thank you. We have another question, Michelle Petty.
Hi, yeah, I'm thinking, especially for our youth who may experience both homicidal and or suicidal ideation, because sometimes they are occurring at the same time. That might be high utilizers in both the community or home and also in the schools. Because the BTA process many times can lead to identifying homicidal ideation, intent, or plan. Is the CAPE team going to be involved in the team as far as the assessment and the in the same way that they are and when they're involved for the suicidality concerns with the schools?
It depends on the situation. So the CAPE team, the question is a CAPE team is that's a crisis assessment prevention education team that are mobile crisis. Will they be involved in every single case? Not necessarily. It depends on the level of assessment. They are part of, and some of that team and others are part of the district team where they are part of it by statute, right? So, and we, in our district, we're utilizing that particular department to fill that particular role on the district threat management team. So are they involved at school-based ones? Some of them they are, some of them they are not, depending on the situation.
Does that answer your question, Michelle?
Yeah. I just, and I think it's going to come down to individual situations, but I think that sometimes the additional support for homicidal students, or they may be expressing some level of that ideation or plan when it comes to looking at whether it meets the statutory requirements of the Baker Act. Sometimes schools need some additional assistance. So I wasn't sure if CAPE would be supporting with homicidal comments or statements as well. So thank you.
So let me rephrase too. They are always the first to call, especially when there is suicidal and a school-based team is looking at a potential concern to come in and assess the situation. They would be involved.
Ms. Federer, you had it.
Additionally, given the very loose parameters you laid out in your example, the state also requires any a threat that's leveled as a high threat, which seems likely given the very brief parameters you laid out in your example, is co-monitored between the school and the district team. So an example like you laid out seems like it might, could lead to a high based on what you stated briefly. And a high threat would be co-monitored by the district team in addition to the school team. And those CAPE members would likely be on the district team as well.
Thank you very much. Very informative. Any other comment or question? Please, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Can we go back to the slide on the protective factors? I think, okay, this is bureaucracy at its best, right? It has to be addressed. It should be addressed. It seems like a good way of addressing it. But I want to prevent problems. And so, and it was actually the other slide that triggered the thought when it talked about how you deal with extracurricular activities. So I assume that means if the child made a threat that, they may or may not be able to continue to participate depending on the threat and who's involved and yada, yada. But I also think that extracurricular activities are a protective factor and fall into appropriate groups and mentorship and nonviolent, legally and socially sanctioned conflict resolution, like all of the above, right? But I don't think that the district works it properly, right? And I remember when I was on the board, I asked that we start looking at for children recommended for expulsion if they were involved in extracurricular activities. And the pattern was that they were not, right? And so I'm just going to offer this and, you can put it on a sticky note and dismiss it if you want. But I've always thought that we as a system need to work to get children involved in extracurricular, like recruit them, right? And one way to do that, in my magical way of thinking, would be to create like a Google form that the students would fill out at the beginning of each semester and say, what are you into? Well, I'm into cheerleading. I participate in the cheerleading group at Lake Light or whatever. Here's the name of my coach. Here's the number. Of course, all the appropriate legal stuff. That way you know who the child's connected with, what extracurricular activities, and how about this? Then the teacher can affirm that child by saying, "Oh, you know, I'm so proud you've done all your work this week. I'm gonna tell your coach, you know, or whatever, or the reverse, right?" And so I just offer that up for consideration because to me, it seems like a fairly simple way of providing the protective factors. And then for students who are not involved in extracurricular activities, the follow-up would be, well, what are you interested in? And do we provide it? Because I think if we look at the after-school programs at various schools, the wealthier schools are going to have more robust after-school programs, more exciting, more variation, right? And the poorer schools are not. And that has to be addressed. And I'm not saying it should be all addressed with district money, but if we're not clear about what it should be, then we can't use the district's influence to try to get money from the private sector or the business community, right? And while I'm rambling, I'm gonna say one more thing. You know how many scholarships are given out for cheerleading for college? But you had to be able to flip, okay? Now, how many children living in poverty have access to gymnastics class? See, we need to remedy that. We know where these gaps are, but we're not trying to connect community resources to remedy it. But I think this is a simple one, and I think it falls under protective factors. So thank you.
I want to say you're absolutely you're right. And Ms. Fetterman, as I recall, because I went through the training, there's case studies that we go through, and one of the things that we work to look for is a protective factor of connected to an external club activity of some sort, which is a good thing, right? So if a student is involved in something like that, that is a preventive factor that we want to really make sure also part of the support management plan. So to your point, if there's a coach that the student's connected, that can play kind of two roles, right? A trusted adult as well as part of a group and connected. But absolutely, there's a lot of room for improvement in the system. On the list of some of the things we're looking at with trusted adults and getting students connected, also came out from the superintendent student and advisory committee as well. Students being connected to external clubs. And
Jack has a question.
It seemed the previous threat assessment, although it was called threat assessment, not management, was pretty good in Palm Beach County. Was it recognized as being inadequate from the state level, or?
No, not at all. Well, what the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission looked at all the districts as a whole. So we have to send up all of this to the state on a regular basis. However, what they saw is great variance. We had a pretty robust system, but there are a number of districts, I want to say maybe 10 or so, that were still paper and pencil, that nothing was in a database. So it was very difficult for those districts, including some large districts, to share information with others. There was, we use CSTAG. There's some other models out there that districts were using different models, which we had that autonomy. The MSD Commission really wanted something that was uniform, so we could talk to each other more effectively.
Yeah, I think there were just there are several items that are the same because, as you pointed out, it was a solid system. There were just some pieces, I think, to align. A few of the biggest ones, I think, are very positive for students. Having a member that knows the student, having somebody come in that knows the student, where before that wasn't required. I know in our district, Dr. Ruth Francis, had advised schools, if nobody on the team knows the young person, you really should talk to somebody, but that wasn't a state rule. Now it's actually encoded in the statute. So everybody has to do that. So yes, you're right. Here in Palm Beach County, that was something that we did very well, but not everybody did it. So now it's encoded in statute as well. Previously, the principal could be on the team as the administrative member. Now they say the principal shouldn't be, which serves as a checks and balances for the school because the team does the work and the principal checks it. It's a good checks and balances concept. So it's just some tweaks to what the positives that were already in there. And I think another big piece is that focus on the protective factors. So it's not just, well, here are all the things that we're going to take away. It's what do we put in place for young people to really put those protective factors in, such as the extracurricular activities, the sports, the mentor, those different protective factors are another aspect. So it was taking what was a good system and building upon it, making it stronger.
Just a quick question, on the example you gave, of Cruz, when he was already out of school and all that, but then keeping money to monitor him, quote unquote, to monitor him would have been as keeping him in parole, and he will have to be reporting, but that was not happening. He just came out of the blue, boom, and did what he did. So it's tough, Thank you. Any other comment, questions? Thank you. Go ahead.
I have a comment.
Please.
I just have to flag that while we are saying all of this, the district is also creating barriers to things like extracurricular activities by requiring a parental consent form. This is coming up a lot for me in my community with students who used to be part of their GSA club, and now they can no longer participate in that club. And especially for LGBTQ youth, having that safe space at school does save lives. And I just have to put that comment in this room that this all sounds great, the protective measures, but it's a little hypocritical. And I don't know if there's anything to do about that. I don't know if that parental slip is a district mandate or a state mandate. I don't know if it's in a bill or if it's just something the district is doing to cover themselves. Maybe you can answer that question, but
Yeah,
that is an issue that is going to, it's creating a lot of barriers for LGBTQ youth.
So it's creating a lot of barriers everywhere. It's not a school district rule. It is a state Board of Ed rulemaking that requires a parent permission slip for any type of extracurricular activities, from tutoring to clubs to sports to some things, we already had in place, but it goes well above and beyond. So yeah, that's a DOE rule, and there's a lot of challenges with that. I'm working with a lot of nonprofits that work in our schools that are having challenges with that particular piece. From, for example, Take Stock in Children, which work on scholarships, right? So it has very specifics in the rule, and Ms. Carmona can keep me honest, but including like who's supervising, when it meets, the type of activity. So it's pretty descriptive of what you have to let parents know and have permission for. And it is definitely causing a barrier. Hopefully we'll get some shift in that in the future around that piece. The board is aware of it and has heard that. I suspect it coming possibly up at the delegation meeting as well.
Okay, I had a question before from Mariana Blanco. Do you still have it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pagan. It was just to jump on that. I know that, recently we've been working with a couple of groups, for example, I Learned America, and they have a partnership with the school district, but they did tell us that a lot of the schools are not honoring that partnership agreement. That would be incredibly beneficial to the students because it's, kind of a self-awareness program and would help with a lot of the items that we're talking about. But that also comes from the fear of the principals and teachers. And I think also a lot of the bureaucracy, the forms they have to sign, the legalities and stuff. But I do agree that we just need to be more honest and more transparent about the things that we are doing collectively, and where the barriers stand, so we can address them and fix them.
And Ms. Blaga, I'm glad you brought that up. We have a number of outside partners who come in to teach students about certain things, right? From human trafficking to whatever, right? Of type of support. Another new rules require all curriculum materials to be reviewed and approved, in particular by a media specialist. So that has caused another challenge where outside partners have worked with us in our schools that now have to be approved. Their curriculum has to be reviewed. That's an additional challenge that I think you're speaking to. So if a principal's not honoring it, I'm assuming it's probably someone there, but if you want to send it to me offline, I could look at it. But it's probably something to do with that. Okay.
In support of Ms. Kenny's question regarding the form itself and knowing that it's driven by a DOE rule, has legal weighed in as to whether this is kind of like just a bureaucratic reach that's actually tied to the state statute or anything of that nature, knowing that that it is oftentimes lately with the Department of Ed, the interpretation of new laws that's providing some of these barriers that are making it difficult for us to do this work.
Ms. Carmona, did you hear the question?
Yes, and we have reviewed the rule. We have a board policy that had to be revised based on this rule. Discussed it with other school districts as well. And the legal consensus among attorneys who represent school boards across the state is that a parental consent is required for participation in any extracurricular or supplemental activity at a school.
Thank you for that opinion, ma'am.
Good question. Good questions.
Any other questions? We're going to continue.
Okay, so my other item?
Yeah, the next item, unfinished business?
No, member organizations. So.
Oh, member organizations, yes.
So, sorry. So, we've had new agencies come on to the District Diversity and Equity Committee, as well as number of agencies have been on for a long time. We've had changes in who represents those particular membership. What we haven't done, I know at least the last couple of years or 3 years, I don't know how long I've been kind of working with this committee directly, is really the sharing of information from each organization and agency to each other. So each of you, this particular committee as a board approved committee is a little bit different than some of them because you actually represent an agency, right, or organization that in our community versus being a board approved representative, right, that I select as a school board member. So what I'm asking and what I want to do is for, because all of you have are rich in resources that support the community, is to educate the other membership around what you do as an organization, what you can offer the community so that we can have some synergy amongst the membership to support some of the priorities. So not to pick on Michelle Beatty, but Michelle, we work in a lot of meetings. So she represents JFK North, right? Obviously, a lot of people know that's where students get transferred to for involuntary evaluation. But I think there's other things that they do a lot of that you may not be aware of, and I may not be aware of. So where for her to have some time on upcoming agendas, and each of you on upcoming agendas, to share about your organization, what you do, and how you support the community so that it can be another resource for you and your organization to get the word out. Guatemalan Center, for example, has been rich in resources helping the school district, but you all might not know about what they do and the support they provide. So I think, and we'll send out, Ms. Simmons kind of put together some bullet points that we'll send out to you to think about, so that in upcoming meetings, I'd like to do like at least maybe 2 or 3 a meeting, because obviously we have, I think, 20 plus 23 or 24, 23 representatives outside of Classroom Teachers Association and school-based administrators. And I did want to welcome that we do have Classroom Teachers Association with Gordon. He made it today, and we had Principal Blavitt. So to also kind of hear some of the topics that go on, because that was a recommendation when we put this together. So any questions, comments? Hopefully you'll see this as a good thing to learn more about what each of you are doing. And if you'd like to volunteer to be one of the first ones to go for the month of November, you can let Susan know, or Janina or myself. Otherwise, I'll told you to be part of that process.
All right.
Ms. Simmons says she votes for the people who didn't show up today.
And then next item of the agenda, we're gonna go on finished business.
So-
Mr. Keith Oswald?
Yes, so unfinished business, and Diana Snyder will also be joining in a minute. She was in another meeting. So, and I'll also turn it back over to Ms. Kenny, because this, actually, you had brought this up at the last meeting. It wasn't on the agenda, but I want to address first what the district is doing around the LGBT support guide. So one of the things was around training, an FAQ, and resources for families. So there is training that is about to roll out regarding the LGBTQ guide. Within it, also including resources for families, for the schools to know who to reach out for support is part of that particular training. So that is being rolled out. It's been reviewed by upper leadership and about to come out very soon. So I do want to let you know that that is happening, and it does include the resources. In addition, and Ms. Snyder's been working on that. I think she'll be coming in the specific questions to that. As it relates to the pronoun change request form, the school district did meet with Equality Florida and others regarding what some other districts and positions that they have taken regarding the use of pronoun change request form. The school district's position has been based on interpretation of the rule, in particular as it means for educators. And I'm going to read part of that so you have the context. There's a rule 6A 10.081, principles of professional conduct for the education profession in Florida. So basically applies to anybody who's a teacher. And the one section 14, which speaks to shall not violate statute 1000.071, which relates to the use of personal titles and pronouns in educational institutions. So some districts have taken the position to have parent permission and voluntarily, if a parent or student requests to use a specific pronoun, to allow that to happen and give the educator the choice to whether or not they want to use that pronoun. Our position has been that we don't, there is no test case study out there. There is no, and have concern that there potentially will be a case study in the future. And we don't want to put any of the educators in our district in a position that could potentially have consequences up to losing their teaching certificate, or there's a lot of unknowns, right? Regarding that being challenged, not necessarily by the family who's asking for the permission, but by potentially others who may challenge, which we have seen that within the system. So that, Ms. Carmona, anything that you want to add regarding our position?
No, I think you've pretty much explained it. Thank you.
So regards to the, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, but I do want to give updates as you brought it up to where we're at.
Okay, thank you for that. So what I'm hearing is that the district does not want to include this pronoun change form for fear of being punished by the state, essentially.
It's not, so I wouldn't say it's fear. So, and it's not that we would be punished. Potentially it applies, this rule applies to the teaching profession. So the individual teacher. So even though if I'm a parent, I get permission for Mr. for Gordon to use, a different, my pronoun that I prefer, and it's not based off my biological sex at birth, that, what is unknown is, can someone else challenge that? Not necessarily. And he chooses to do that, but someone else challenges that.
Like another parent says, I don't want that child to use their affirmed pronouns in school, so I'm going to sue the teacher.
Correct. And put in a position. That is an unknown.
So let me ask, legal.
Ms. Carmona is going to correct me.
Okay, yeah. My question is, under the parental rights bill, doesn't that parent have the right to have their child use the pronouns that they want in school?
Yeah, there are lots of interpretations to these laws. I mean, what concerns us the most right now is the potential for a district employee to lose their teaching certificate based on the way this rule is written.
Well, as we know, the teacher could choose to not use those students' affirmed pronouns if they are afraid. The thing is that most teachers are willing to take that risk because they're willing to risk their teacher's license for their students' lives. And I know that sounds drastic to a lot of people, but as we learn almost every time we come in here, that just having one affirming teacher can make a huge difference in a student's life. And whether they choose violence, self-harm, suicide, one teacher can make a huge difference. We fought for years to have a pronoun column in SIS because we understand that having that information available to all teachers, even if they can choose whether they want to use those affirmed pronouns or not, which is wrong, but that's the law, making that information available to teachers who do want to affirm their students, even if it poses a risk. And most of the teachers I've talked to are willing to take that risk because they care about their students more than their career. And they're willing to die on this hill because it's the right thing to do. So Broward County has included this pronoun change form, and it states that, it states the legal backing behind it. It states that the parent has to sign it in front of a district or in front of a school administrator so that they know that the signature is valid. It seems very Loctite to me. I mean, if another person who has nothing to do with that student's life comes in and challenges that, I just don't understand why this school district would not take a stance when we have our equity statement. Every time I talk to the school board members, they say, we're doing everything we can to create safe spaces in schools, but they're not doing everything they can because this is something simple that they could do. So what I'm asking this committee to do today is to add all of our voices to this so that it's not just me, because it's extremely important. And to bring it back to the 3 items that I'm asking to be added back into this guide. And just to back up a little bit, I'm referring to the LGBTQ Student Support Guide. We've had it for a couple of years now. It used to be over 100 pages. It's been whittled down to 11 pages. And it's really just a reiteration of the laws and what they don't allow us to do anymore. What I'm asking the district to add back into this guide are 3 things. One is the pronoun change request form. Another is a frequently asked question page with all the questions I get every day about what teachers can and can't do. And a page of resources that Mr. Oswald mentioned will be in this training. The guide is useful because teachers have access to it all the time. When I was a teacher, I used this guide to advocate for my students with my principal, who was not supportive of trans students. And said, for example, trans students can't use their affirmed name in the yearbook because a yearbook is a legal document, which I knew was not true. So I was able to take the student support guide to the administrators at my school and say, the district says that trans students should have their affirmed names in a yearbook. So that's the value of the guide. Having a resource page is valuable because students are going to come to their teachers with, maybe all these issues that we just learned about today. And so having this guide in your classroom or accessible in your email, they can provide those hotline numbers. They can provide the phone number or address to Compass, and especially for parents as well. So now we are in a place where students may be outed by the school to their parents, but then what do? Do they just say, okay, well, your student is trans, good luck? Or do they say your student or your child is trans and here are some resources that we can provide to help you navigate this new identity that your child is presenting? So then the frequently asked questions page, I'll just read you a few questions that I know the district does have definitive answers on, but they're just not getting that information to teachers, from what I understand. They might give this information to principals or administrators, but if that principal or administrator doesn't want to diffuse that information and give it to teachers, they just aren't, or they're interpreting it in a different way. So what I'm seeing is a lot of, there's some schools who are doing everything they can truly to support these students, and they are helping teachers and students feel safe. Other schools are not doing that, and they're over complying with these laws, whether that's out of fear or discrimination, whatever their reasons may be. So having all of these questions laid out with answers from the district level is going to empower students and teachers in knowing what their rights are, so that we have a consistency amongst the district. So some of these questions are, can teachers and school staff display pride flags, safe space posters, or other LGBTQ-related decorations in their classrooms and offices? Another question is, when must a teacher or administrator contact parents regarding a student's gender identity or sexual orientation? And as a follow-up is, what is considered a change in services? Because the answer is when there's a change in services, but teachers don't always know what that means. Are school counselors, therapists, and other mental health professionals in schools allowed to discuss a student's LGBTQ status with or without parental consent? This is a question that I've received a few times, and I don't know the answer. How can I make a single-stall restroom available for student use at my school? Incredibly important. We can't build one, but there are single-stall restrooms that can be changed from faculty to student restrooms, things like that. Are students allowed to have GSA clubs? Are GSA clubs allowed to be called by other names, or is GSA required in the name? Are students with LGBTQ parents allowed to talk about their families at school? Are LGBTQ teachers allowed to talk about their partners and families at school? And there's a few other questions in there, but these are the questions that I'm asked a lot, as just from my community who know that I'm an advocate at the school district level. And I know that some of these issues have now come to the district and come to the legal department, and the legal department has said you can't have pride flags in your classroom, but not all teachers know that. So the easiest way, the fastest way that I can imagine getting all of this information out to all teachers is to put this information back into this guide and have the guide sent to all school teachers and staff, not just principals, not just administrators, but all staff, so that everyone has access to this information and everyone can know what their rights are. And if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Ms. Snyder, I don't know if you came in when I said, but I think you said the training is about to roll out regarding the guide. That does include a list of the resources for employees to give for families for support. The FAQ part of that as well? I think there is.
Correct. Both the FAQ as well as the list of resources. And I am here just serving as a liaison. The PD department is unavailable today due to a death in the family. So Lisa Cremona assisted with this, and the FAQs have been added into that training, as well as the list of resources for families. Both of those have been included and embedded into that training.
Can I ask who receives the training?
It is open to everyone in our district.
Open to, but
every employee,
but not required.
No. not required.
So it's an optional training. A
Correct.
teacher could take it. A
Correct.
principal could take it.
Correct.
When does that roll out?
It should be by the end of this week.
By the end of the week, right? So can I ask why these two pieces, the resources and the FAQs, would be included in the training but not in the guide?
I do not have the answer to that.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I asked why these two pieces, the FAQs and the resources, would be included in training but not in the guide.
I'll have to talk to other, Mr. Tierney and Ms. White and see. I don't see why it can't be added, but we can talk to them about it.
The benefit, if you would like to relay this, is the benefit of having it in the guide versus just a training. I'm happy that it's in the training, but it's optional. Plenty of teachers are never going to see that training. And it's not available at all times, unlike the guide. So if a situation comes up that, maybe this information isn't relevant to a teacher right now because they've never had someone come to them with these questions, later in the year, how would they access that information? Like, how would they access that training? Having the guide available at all times, make sure that when it does become relevant, they can access that information.
The training is also available at all times.
That's good to know.
It's available on demand at any time.
Okay, we have two people who have questions. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. I think I have a question and a comment or something. Anyway, can we get copies of the more than 100-page LGBTQ student guide and the 11-page one? Get emailed to us, and then
I think we sent out the new one already, but we can send both.
Okay, thank you. Then, there was something you were saying. It was a phrase you used about bathrooms, single cell bathrooms. Is that what you said?
Single stall bathrooms.
Stall. Okay, all right. Because my
Oh, yeah,
brain
I wanted
wasn't
to
getting it.
comment.
Okay.
Most schools have worked out that there is a single stall bathroom available. We worked out that early on.
Yes.
So if it's a lack of communication, then that's a different issue then.
Yeah. I would like that information to be made available to teachers. So just to use another personal example. When I was a teacher, there was a single stall, and we're calling these single stall restrooms, they're gender neutral single stall restrooms. There was one available. There's usually one available in the nurse's office. Few issues with that. One is that a student that would normally take 2 minutes to go to the bathroom now has to take 10, 15 minutes to walk across campus to the nurse's restroom to use a restroom they feel comfortable in, missing out on their education during that time. It also, during COVID, a lot of kids were like, I don't really want to use the nurse's bathroom. I don't want to catch COVID. Makes sense. So as a teacher, I identified 2 single stall restrooms in my building, in the art building. And I asked the dean of my department if we could change one to a faculty gender neutral restroom and one into a student gender neutral restroom. And we did, no problem. We just changed the placards on the outside of the restroom. So if more teachers knew that information, there would be more single stall restrooms available for students.
So just a comment and then another comment. So your description about the single stall bathroom and having it across campus flashed in my mind the movie Hidden Figures, where the character had to run across the entire facility to go to the segregated bathroom. So the Coalition for Black Student Achievement, I will say this, representing the organization, supports your position on not only having the pronoun change form, which it makes no sense to me, the level of fear with that. It's a communication to the teacher, right? The other thing I want to say is the page of resources. Have it in the guide, but I also see that as something that maybe should be put like almost on a rat card in the guidance office, or just like available to students and parents broadly who may not know about this support guide, because that's going to communicate to people inside the district And I want to make sure they know about the resources without having to go to, their teacher or whoever. Thanks.
Thank you. We have one more question. Amanda Canet.
Hello, I'm off camera because I am currently under the weather, but I'm going to try to best to relay everything I want to share because this is obviously very important to me and hopefully to everyone that is on this committee. I want to echo a lot of what Emmy said because we are getting a lot of those questions from our parents and community members because of what we do. And we also are getting a lot of requests from teachers and sharing that they want to do more for their students than what the state is allowing us to do. I don't see the fear in worrying. I understand about teachers losing their licensure, but what's to say that a parent who is affirming of their child's gender wouldn't sue us because we're not letting them go by the pronouns they want to use in school for them. I feel like we could go either way with that if another parent can sue a teacher because they're using it for somebody else, what's to say that a parent of an affirming kid couldn't do that to us as well? I think that we need to be able to do as much as possible to support the students that are being attacked the most right now. And definitely LGBTQ students is one of the top population currently for the state of Florida. I would say for the gender neutral restrooms, we hear that a lot, that they are really needed. And it's up to the child's choice if they want to use that one or if they feel comfortable in the past using the restroom that affirmed with them, because we have both. We've also had students that don't use the restroom at all and have gotten several urinary tract infections because they do not use the restroom at school, because that is how much of the fear of being harassed in the restrooms is, and not feeling comfortable in their school environment to use a restroom. So that is something that is a reality for our students. I have another student right now in our program that is about to leave school and do homeschooling because of the bullying that they're experiencing in middle school. And so this is a reality of what's happening right now when I think we need to provide as much tools and support to all the teachers, because a lot of the teachers are seeking it out for themselves, and I commend them for that, but others may not know where to look for. And so if we can make the least amount of barriers for them to access the information that they need to, they should be worrying about teaching their subjects and not all of these things that we're putting on them. But this is the reality we live in. And so I just want to make sure that I support Emmy and the things that we are trying to do with this committee. We just did the proclamation for LGBTQ History Month. That's great. We need to do the things that are going to really support those students every day in class, because if not, we're going to lose them to alternative versions of schooling or to suicide. And that is just a reality of what we're putting on these families, of a lot of fear and wanting to leave the state. And we have many kids who cannot leave the state. And so where does that leave them? And I would be happy to encompass as well to do whatever we can to support the students and the faculty that are really experiencing the brunt of this. And so I don't see any issue with us doing the pronouns form, because if it's parents' rights, the parents should have a right. And we have plenty of parents who want that to be a reality for their child, so that they can have a safe learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kenneth. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Any other question? Comments? So, our agenda.
Did you want to add something about the original document or no? Okay.
So our agenda is complete? Yes. Please.
I would like to offer a motion that, that the body would vote on to support Emmy's 3 recommendations, even though I understand some are in progress. One, well, let me ask Emmy to say it so that I don't misinterpret. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. So, as a committee, we would recommend to the school board that 3 additions be made to the LGBTQ support guide. 1, the pronoun change request form. 2, local and online support resources. And 3, an FAQ page, including, I did send a list of frequently asked questions. I think you guys have that. So 3 would be an FAQ page with frequently asked questions regarding LGBTQ do's and don'ts in schools.
So that's my motion.
Motion. Any seconds?
Can I second it? I'll let somebody.
I can second if not. Emmy?
Make it cleaner.
By Ms. Amanda. Any opposed?
No, any further discussion?
Any further discussion?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So those online can make sure you unmute or raise your hand. Affirmative, if you support.
All in line, please raise your hands.
Keep your hands raised for a second, just to make sure.
Make sure we count you. You're still behind the mic. You haven't fallen asleep.
And in the room?
The silence is consent, correct?
No, I just want to see in the room then.
And in the room, vote is consent.
Okay, opposed?
Any opposed?
I'm just sustaining.
We got 1 sustained. No oppositions. 1 sustained. So the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your support. And I was wondering if we could receive a copy of the training.
We can work on that, yes.
Thank you.
So the agenda is completed. So meeting adjourned. The next meeting is going to take place, and it's a special day. It's November 16. Guess what? Your calories going to be still down because turkey haven't come yet. So we're looking forward to see you all on November 16th. Thank you.
And I'll be reaching out to somebody to share out next meeting as well. So motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Dr. Robinson, yeah.
Second. Any opposed? We're gone. Thank you.
Mr. Rhodes did, yeah.
Yeah.